All right, guys. So we just raw dogged this intro because we're changing some things around here. And I just want to thank you all for joining us and to hold space with us today as we talk about California spirituality. Of course, you were listening to the new and improved PH2T3R Pater, the Journal of Solar Culture. And I'm here with my normal co host, the totally rad C.B. Robertson, author of many fine books and a truly deep spiritual healer, um, much as I am and through the years, and so we just wanted to talk a little bit about what we call California spirituality,
Totally.
and yeah, yeah. And the thing about it is, it can be anything, and that's I wrote
And
the
nothing.
intro. Exactly, exactly. Thank you, brother. But it can be a it's fundamental characteristic because of course this isn't one thing. This isn't one. It's a vibe that comes out of California, and it's everywhere. You can find it in every major city. Austin is really big with it right now. In fact, Austin may be the new capital of it right now, from at least from the content that I see comes out of there. All your Aubrey Marcuses, and he's like the he's the normal one, and then it goes on down from there into healing things and retreats and all these things, and but it seems like this idea of California spirituality that we're kind of lampooning here, or just feeling, is that there's it's non-judgmental, and I think one of the reasons that California became that way is because it had so many immigrants from different parts of the country, not necessarily the world, that too, but also from the different parts of the country. I mean, California is where, since they had the gold rush era, so everybody goes there to get rich, right? Everybody from everywhere goes there to get rich. Go west, young man. Everybody goes out there to get rich, and then they those people were there, and then obviously Hollywood happened, and so
Yes.
you have every prom king and prom queen from Middle America, all these corn-fed, beautiful people, uh, going out there to become rich and famous and become like this Hollywood legend and go live their best life out there. And of course, it's this beautiful place. California, for everything that you could say wrong with it politically, is probably one of the most beautiful states in the country, just in terms of just the sheer biodiversity of the whole state. It's huge, and you can be on the top of like White Cap Mountains, and then back in the desert. I did that recently. Obviously, the beaches. I mean, the whole thing is there's the whole one side of it is a beach from top to bottom. So there's that. You have like redwood forests and where they grow up all the ganja up there, up at the top of Northern California, and then you have obviously Southern California and that whole vibe, and it's a very laid back vibe. It's very different from the East Coast. I grew up on the East Coast. I lived in New York City for a while, and you have this vibe where everybody's kind of intense, and it's just because they're angry because they're too close together. Really, like New York, like the weather's bad and it's humid and they're too close together. Like it's like New York City vibe is like it stinks and it's hot and or cold, either one. And everybody's pushed together, and there are 150 people walking the street. You have to, if you aren't used to it, there's an energy to it that is very overwhelming.
Yeah.
Like
It's
I remember.
especially overwhelming. I've heard if you get stuck with a neighbor who's a Bostonian, that can be apparently stressful as well.
Well, possibly. I've never had that experience, but it's just. I remember when I went to school there as a kid, I would take the train from Pennsylvania to go to New York City, and you get off the train, and you go through. At the time, I think it wasn't Grand Central Station. It's the other Penn Station, I think, is what it was. And you'd come up basically out of the ground onto the street, surrounded by hundreds of people, like, and they're all moving, like, and it's just this wall of people that's just moving, and you're just like, all right, let's go, because like you're coming from like a small town environment, or you just a few people around, you have all this, and you have to be obviously your situational awareness has to go through the roof, And because you're like, okay, there are people all around me. Some of them are trying to rob me. Some of them are trying to do all kinds. You just have to be really aware. And so I just think New York people tend to be high strung, whereas East Coast people, whereas West Coast people, was set up much more in a big open grid suburbia for as far as the eye could see, all the urban sprawl, and it's car culture. Everybody drives everywhere. In New York, you don't drive anywhere unless you're like really wealthy. It just costs a fortune to park a car there. And but in LA, everybody just drives. In Southern California, everybody drives. All of California, you just drive everywhere. And so there's this laid back, like you don't have to be too close to anybody if you don't want to. You can kind of hang out with whoever you want to. People are going to the beach. People are chilling out. And also you have people from all different places of the country who've probably been judged. It's a bunch of theater kids, as I was called recently. A bunch of theater kids from like middle America who've been judged for whatever reason. I'm thinking the movie Footloose is coming to mind. They're in these small towns where they can't do anything, and they want to go and live the big city life. I mean, I've been that kid, and so they don't want to be judged. You come up to a place and you want to go and do stuff and like experience life and like whatever's new and wow and whatever. And there's always people coming from all these places and sharing all these things. And so I think that really created the environment for this like California spirituality that we're talking about, which is really not any one thing, but all the things. And you might actually do all the things, like if you're out there, because I lived in LA for a while. And I've lived in San Francisco for a while, and yeah, it's like people will go from one thing to another, be like, oh, well, there's doing this really spiritual thing over here, and they're doing this really spiritual thing over here. And you go and take this seminar and that seminar. Maybe this year you're this, and that year you're that, and then you just everyone's doing something that's like exotic, and so it just everything, but then also nothing, because anything that is everything is also nothing. And so it becomes just everything is cool, man. And everything is like, there's wisdom in everything. There's wisdom in everything. There's God in everything. You can just feel the 60s vibe coming right off of it. And then what happens is that there's no boundaries there. Really, like what is good and whatever. Like whatever is your trip, man. Just don't, obviously... But the main value is non-judgment. Like, don't judge me, and I won't judge you. And one of the things that I thought about as we were preparing for this episode was the idea that works until you get something like, Marxism, and with its struggle session mentality, and the whole bringing the margins to the center and all that thing, all this kind of gnostic Marxism that we've been talking about, that became woke. And as that goes into California spirituality can't fight that because it can't judge, so it has to absorb it.
Yeah,
and I think that's what happened.
Yeah, there's a lot of things going on there. I think there's a certain utopianism that is a part of like the heart of California, like the it has its own sort of like cracked out version of the American dream that is both more grandiose and at the same time sort of latches on to its own disillusionment. This is what creates the like Boulevard of Broken Dreams, the whole Green Day notion of California. And
on that, before you continue, I wanted to drop an anecdote because I have a buddy who I was just hanging out with recently who lives in LA right now, and he's really into architecture and things like that. And he said all the palm trees have a lifespan of about 100 years. And like the big palm trees that line Hollywood Boulevard and all that stuff, they're all dying right now because they're about at their 100 years. They were all planted at turn of the century, big movie industry, whatever, and they're all dying right now because they have their lifespan is up. It's 100 years, so they're having to replace these trees or just cut them down or whatever. So just an interesting kind of dark current
Yeah.
Go on, of the
Well,
Boulevard of Broken Dreams. Yes.
yeah. Well, it reminds me that this kind of spirituality always reminds me of this essay I read back in college. It was called "A Star Is Born," and it was about who's that actress that played in The Wizard of Oz? What's her name?
Judy Garland.
Judy Garland. Yeah, and
Okay.
it was about this sort of downward spiral of like degradation in pursuit of authenticity, in pursuit of the appearance of reality, because these TV stars would become famous. But at some point, the character fuses with the actor in the perception of the public, and the public, when that fusion happens, the life of the actor becomes as important and as interesting and as much of a story as the story they are portraying on the television. And so the lives of the actors become the new drama that becomes manufactured. But of course, people begin to doubt the authenticity. They can't suspend their disbelief if that story is too perfect. And so they have to manufacture sordid affairs and breakups and infidelities and drug problems and things of that nature. And there's this downwards, like this is like Plato's nightmare, right? From the the Republic, of these people portraying things that they are not, but then gradually becoming the thing that they are portraying. And there's this strange fusion between perception and not perception, between pretense and reality. And I was trying to think earlier today, like what characterizes this California spirituality, which of course is more than just in California, but of course, because Mark is in the comments here saying that he feels attacked, and we're very sorry. We didn't mean any offense by this.
Yeah, we're not judging you. Whatever your trip, man.
Only
If you
love.
live in California, that's fine, man.
Yeah. But it does seem to have this spirituality seems to have as you were saying, it can't defend anything because it is deeply attached to how things appear and the experience we make of them in the film kind of sense. Like there's something coming from Hollywood in this sense that makes the showiness of how one dresses and so forth, and getting the glasses, the certain persona, this spiritual but not religious man vibe, makes that more important than, for instance, the choices that you make, the actual actions you take. Because in other religions, whether it's Christianity or Islam or Buddhism, there is dressing up, there is, formalized ritual and so forth. But that's not the end in itself. That's a tool to accomplish some end, which is a change in your behavior and your action and in your relationships. And with this California spirituality, it seems to be more about the vibe. It's more about the persona and the presentation. And I think that there is an association there between that and the feeling of profundity, which connects to, I think, one of the second major characteristics, which is it seems to be profoundly influenced, and maybe this is since, I would say, Terence McKenna in the 70s. It's been profoundly influenced by particular kinds of hallucinogens. And there was a third point that I don't remember, but the hallucinogens and the performative nature seem to be big components of this thing. Oh, and the third one, which is also related to hallucinogens, is the pursuit of the unity of all things, the coming together of everything, the oneness of things. That, like, there are other religions that are pantheistic. There are other religions that have elements of these, but the unity of these three, the unity, the oneness of the world, the affinity for Terence McKenna's choice of hallucinogens, and this performative about the experience quality seem to kind of characterize this thing, which might be in
we could hit those
competition
in
now.
like an outline, because we could go in like that. Each of those could be like 20 minutes or something like that.
Yeah.
If you want to go that way, we can do that. Because one of the things that I've definitely noticed with what we would call this California spirituality, which I've seen it in like Utah, and like we said, it's in Austin, it's everywhere. As far as you said, the experience and the feeling of profundity, and that comes really, people become experience junkies. They want to go. You can sell them something as a product like this. The ayahuasca ceremonies are a good example. Here's this drug from whatever South America, and it has a very specific history in its place and time. And then you have upper middle class white people drumming drums and doing drugs and having this experience because they're experience junkies. Like they're going there for this experience of like, this is this exotic faraway thing by these simple people that are somehow more authentic than we are. And so there's something more profound because they're old, whatever their ways are older and more authentic. Whereas really, this is some guy, like I said, named Steve, who went down there and got some of the drugs and like learned how to do some of their shit, and then brought it back. And maybe he's super into it, whatever. But then he puts on the ceremony for these people, and they pay him a lot of money, and they have this great experience that he's basically engineered, which is not wrong. Because I'm in the creating experience business myself to some degree, but you want to make sure, this idea that you can just hire a shaman like from like a Native American thing or like this thing or that thing or whatever, and then they're going to have this like amazing experience like for this culture that they're not connected to and really don't understand, and which probably exists more in a folkloric sense than it does in a real sense anyway, because they probably have iPhones too.
Yeah. Or if it does exist in a real sense, they're not getting it, because the people who this experience of shamanism that many of these guys have is equivalent to the study abroad trips that college kids take in their, junior year. They get to see the world, for, 2 weeks in Paris where they hit all the main tourist events, and then, return home feeling like enlightened, feeling that they have become well traveled in as efficient and quick of a time as possible, without actually having the deep experience of living properly in the place, experiencing boredom in a foreign place, working in a foreign city. And by the way, I'm not claiming that I have done something like that, but like I would not pretend that my experience abroad is equivalent to someone like my dad, for instance, who spent 18 months in Thailand and Malaysia working on underwater parks and things like that. There's a tremendous difference between 2 to 3 weeks traveling for recreation, to see museums, to see famous places, and which is fine. It's not, but like it's a fun thing to do, and I'm not trying to knock that, but as a metaphor, like if you wouldn't say, "Oh, I'm now Vic Verdier because I've been in a foreign place for a few weeks." And I feel like there's something similar with the shamanism thing going on there. Like you haven't become initiated into some ancient tradition because you paid either for a shaman to give you ayahuasca for a week, or you paid a bunch of buds guys to beat you up for a few days, also in California. Or this kind of recreational, efficient simulacra of depth. There's no replacement really for time, I don't think.
Well, yeah, and context. And context.
True.
Like you said, obviously people being, having these experiences or military experiences. I mean, obviously the different context is that at the end of the day, they're being prepared to go do a thing. Whereas these guys are just having experience. And the same thing is true with, all these things. They're creating an experience, but then it has no real context. Or as you said, I always used to say that I don't travel to other cities. I just move there because I've moved a lot. And I feel like I have a pretty good handle on New York, or at least I did. I mean, it's been a long, long time. But I lived in New York for a while. I've rented an apartment in New York. I've lived there long enough to know New York. I've lived in LA for 3 years. I've lived in San Francisco for a while. I have a good sense of those places. If I went and visited, I've been to Denver once. I don't know anything about Denver. And the same thing is okay, I went to Athens. It was neat, but I wouldn't claim to know what it's like to be Athenian. Or to live in that place, or to it's always struck me as the most pretentious thing, and it's a convention. People do it, but it's just irritating when people are like, they've been to a place one time and they have a big opinion about it, well, this is how it is there. How long were you there? Okay, 2 days. You were there 2 days. You don't know anything about that place. You ate at 3 restaurants and interacted with 15 people.
You met 5 people, and they're like, "This is what people here are like."
Yes, and you really can't know that. There's a big difference between, like I said, okay, I've gone to parties and gotten high with people in LA, and whatever, gone out for margaritas with them, and all the people at Lucio's work that used to be struggling people trying to be actors or comedians or whatever, and talking to them and all that stuff. That's a different thing than I showed up there for a week and partied with some people. I've met some of these people out that are now famous. It was weird. Jeremy Renner. I remember who played then Dahmer, and then I think he's whatever Hawkeye or something. And I remember
he's in the Hurt Locker and
before
the
all
Town.
that, he was just in Dahmer. I think was one of his first breakout. We had seen that, and he walked past us while we were walking home from wherever we were. And I was like, oh, that's that guy. And that was at the very beginning of his career. And there's a lot of people that I've met out there. Actually, Lucio worked in the green room of the Jimmy Kimmel Show for a while. So it was kind of this weird experience back there as well. It's just an interesting, different thing to have been into a place and kind of understand it a little bit better than the people who just visit for a little bit. But and as we're bringing it back to the same thing as the spiritual experiences, the spiritual kind of tourism, that this all these people planning for retreats, and that's there was this great reel. One of those comedy reels making fun of this stuff. What's a retreat? A retreat is where people go who are better than you. It's all these people trying to be they're on a higher spiritual level by being increasingly less judgmental, and but they're really actually very judgmental, and a lot of it in the men's space. Because that's kind of making fun of that specifically, is I see a lot of it in the men's space, and it's adopting the language of women. Basically, these guys who've been to these places and with all these therapy chicks, and there's a certain type of guy who just really likes women, really likes women. I mean, most guys like women. That's cool. But really just wants to be around women all the time. Just women are his bread and butter. Just wants to be surrounded by women. There are those kind of guys in the world. It's a certain type of dude, and he's very heterosexual. He's very heterosexual dude, but he just wants to be around women, and he just listens to everything they have to say and whatever, and just absorbs it, and he's just endlessly entertained by women, and just becomes kind of says the things that they say, and well, and the one that I would think of is probably like an Aubrey Marcus, who at some level is this ruthless business genius. Obviously, he created a whole empire, but what you see is this guy who always is kind of chill and wants to be around women, and here's like optimizing life, but also like don't judge and all that kind of stuff. Let's be happy, and you get that vibe that like it's like this guy's been talking to women too much, like he and because you hear the language that really comes through, and this is what I made fun of in the show, and will continue to make fun of, is that everything with a lot of these women and the things that they seek out in their therapy groups and their healing. So it's all about healing. It's all about healing. There's something, they have trauma and they need to heal. And, a lot of this coaching that we have in the modern world right now is really unlicensed therapy. Basically that's what they're doing. They're taking the language of therapy, but I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm a life coach. And then you can do the exact same things that a therapist would do. And I'm not hating on that because credentialism is bullshit. Like, how many degrees do you have to do to tell someone that they need to get their shit together? There's not really, obviously there's some expertise in psychology, but there's also a lot of bullshit too.
Yeah.
And so it's like, but it's all about healing. And then men take on this thing too, and it's really poisonous for them because men do not need to sit around and talk about healing all the time. 90% of men, they're like I say, I always make allowances because there's some groups that I know that I kind of respect that have, if you're a fireman and you've picked up dead babies and you have you've seen bad things happen. Your friends have died. You're military stuff or whatever. Cops who've shot people that they wish they didn't. Things like that. That's trauma. That is shit that somebody needs to help you deal with. Probably.
Yeah, your parents were meaner than you would have liked them to be when you were 7.
Not trauma.
Is not trauma.
Yeah, that is not a real problem. You need to fucking rub some dirt on it and shut the fuck up. And that's unfortunately, I think most of the people who are tourists in this way are not the people who need real help because that's a very small part of the population. Yeah. But they're people who they want to feel special because they're hurt in a special way and then have some kind of an emotional experience that makes them feel like they're better, but then they're kind of addicted to having those kind of experiences. And they keep coming back. Our one friend that we won't talk about because he's not a friend anymore, we know a guy who I think had been to 40 different kinds of therapy throughout his life. And, and then, they find religion or whatever. And that's another, just another thing. It's another thing for them to do. There's a lot of that. Yeah, this is kind of experience junkie mentality. So that was kind of your first point that you're talking. Oh, and also the performative thing of it.
Which I think is connected because you don't need to go into any kind of depth. You don't need to do any of the boring, tedious stuff. You don't need to do any of the repetition. If you can act the right way or dress the right way or go to the right place to feel the feeling of profound, the feeling of profundity itself. I've had some conversations with some people about the danger of the feeling of learning that can happen if you're, for example, perpetually listening to podcasts. Now, right. I love podcasts. I listen to them as much as the next person.
I don't know how you even listen to as many as you listen to.
but I mean, if you are just listening to a podcast and not applying it in some way, not taking a point that the podcast host made and going off and researching or having conversations with friends or trying things out and trying to apply, if you aren't personally, ideally physically, but at least intellectually interacting with the content, but only kind of passively taking it in, and it goes in one ear and out the other. That's just the feeling of learning. You're not actually learning anything. Some people say that learning is only learning if it results in a change in behavior. I think that's an excessively technical behavioralist B.F. Skinner kind of definition, but there's like a directional kind of truth to that compared to the sort of persistent. I just listened to Andrew Huberman on repeat. I was listening to him yesterday, actually. But you listen to these influencer podcasters, without actually applying anything, you can just get the feeling that you're learning things. So like, oh my gosh, I love feeling like I'm learning things.
Right.
But then you don't change anything. And that can happen with therapy, that can happen with learning, that can happen with relationships. I think that's more for women than for men. But like the experience, the feeling that you are doing a thing rather than actually doing the thing feels like a core part of what we're seeing in this California spirituality. And I think it has a spiritual antecedent, which is not quite the same thing, but which is illustrative of the phenomena. There's some anthropologists were asking the question, what is the most popular religion in the United States? And if you get technical enough, you'll find it's actually not Christianity, because Christianity has certain tenets that if you don't believe, you're not a Christian. What the label they gave to the most common religion in the United States was what they called moralistic therapeutic deism, or MTD. And moralistic therapeutic deism has a few tenets, but the basic idea is there is a God. This God wants us to be nice to each other. This God helps us sometimes if we ask for it. And good people go to heaven when we die. Those are the basics. There was like one other tenet, but that's the gist of it. And it's like, it's exactly half of Christianity. It takes like kind of a Christian framework, and we're just going to ignore the hell and the devil part. We're just going to take away all of any sense of responsibility, and we're going to just wash that over with the feeling of profundity that comes with the belief that we are connected with the almighty creator of the universe and perhaps the universe itself. And we're going to write these compelling songs and maybe take drugs to repeatedly induce that feeling as a kind of I'm going to use some therapeutic language because I don't know how else to describe it, to sort of self-soothe, to keep ourselves in this feeling of profound connection, because it's about the feeling. It's not about the how it changes what we do and who we are at the level of character.
Yeah, it's a feel good. It's a warm fuzzy.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, I mean, that's what I've said that before in terms of ritual as being cathartic, and there's a danger of being addicted to catharsis or state change. And a lot of these experiences, obviously, if you're taking drugs, that's a state change. But there's a lot of things you can do, and it's not necessarily wrong. I mean, I try to induce state changes when I do ritual. You're trying to take people from one place to another and move them through it. But if you have some kind of experience that puts you in a different frame of mind, that's a state change. And so if they go through a state change, then something happened in the ritual, and so they want to have this experience that something happened, something changed. It's not necessarily good, because there are all kinds of state changes. You have good state changes and bad state changes. But if you can put someone in a frame of mind where they feel like they had a change of state, and the feeling of oneness, like you said, the feeling of oneness is a powerful thing. It's very Dionysian. And it's not wrong. I mean, it's Lord of the Earth in our frame. It's very Dionysian. Like this idea is the whole imagery of Dionysus as being this thing that kind of roars up out of the ocean and kind of overcomes you. This idea of it's this uncontrollable animalistic primal void thing that happens, like this, the madness of crowds, like where we can all actually feel at the same time. I mean, and that's, go to a concert. I mean, go to a concert where people were actually all really into it. It's all people feeling at the same time, the same thing. And it's a very powerful thing. It doesn't matter if they're shouting Sig Heil or they're shouting like we are the world. There's a state change that happens in a crowd. And the same thing, I don't care if it's January 6th or it's some like Kambla thing or whatever. It's people having some kind of experience together is a powerful thing, and that's what the Dionysian really is losing yourself in that thing. We've talked about it before in like the Michelin context of like that carrying the thing. It's like people having experience together is a powerful thing to harness. And so when people have that experience, they feel like they're having a spiritual changing experience in itself.
Yeah. And it's exactly what, sorry to bring up this character, but what Sigmund Freud references in Civilization and its Discontents, this oceanic feeling,
yes,
which he claimed he had never experienced and was unfamiliar with, but he said he kept hearing this described, and he said it must be a real thing.
I've definitely experienced that.
Oh yeah.
Being a big crowd of people, and it's like there's a say. I mean, it's like the best. I guess maybe the best symbol of it could be the wave.
Ooh,
yeah, like that people do it the wave, like in a crowd, like it goes through the whole stadium. You know, like that's kind of the vibe that it is. I mean, and you can have. I mean, we have two guys in the order who are going to Burning Man. I mean, they're going. That there's a collectivist experience that they're going to have that we won't understand.
But I think it's there is as entertainment, which is what a concert is. That experience is wonderful and it's fun. If you want to call it spirituality, there is a difference between creating the experience as an end in itself and using it as a means to some end. And so if you look in most religions, they will use this to create a change in the individual, ideally a positive one, you know. But when that experience is generated as an end in itself, which is tremendous fun, there's no spiritual content there. There's no connection to a higher spirit, which is what spirituality means. These people who describe themselves as spiritual but not religious, if they can't point to a particular ideal, to a particular spirit that they are trying to connect with, then what does their spirituality mean?
Right, and it's that one God thing, which that you talked about. That is the mainstream religion of America.
Yeah,
and I think that's incredibly accurate, and it also folds really well into the Buddhist frame that we talked about last week. You know, like there's like everything is one, everything is connected, everything is whatever, but also everything is an illusion. Everything bad is bullshit and a lie and whatever.
I think that the barriers, that the lines that separate us are the illusion. The truth is the unity, which is like tonally, like the line between this Dionysian oceanic feeling and the message of the dragon is like one tone shift.
Yes.
You know.
Yes, 100%. It's very, 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 very close. And that's the tricky part to navigate, because you have to be able to have some of that to be part of the experience. And I think really what that comes down to is identity and context. You know, it's like, okay, well, you can have your Dionysian rite in the context of greater Greek society, and we're all the Greeks having the greater Dionysian rite, and this is a thing that we do together, and we're still part of the same group. This is part of the totality of what we do. But if you have, you know, like just people, like I said, searching it out, or the idea that we're all one, like I said, the idea that we're all one makes us all equally disposable. So it can be very dark very quickly. You know, you use it in the wrong hands. Because, when the world will live as one, the whole fucking Imagine Beatles bullshit thing, you know, when the world lives at one, all of us are like equally disposable. All of us are throwaways. And like, what if everyone's the same? I'm the same matter as you, man. Like, if you weren't here, like you're still me. Like,
you know,
we're still
this
together
is
in the universe.
I wasn't anticipating this, but I feel like we're connecting with some independent deep diving I was doing yesterday about a philosopher who is not from California, but who has become extremely popular in California, specifically in Silicon Valley. And that's Peter Singer, who's a very famous utilitarian from Australia. He's the author of Animal Liberation,
Mm-hmm.
but also this particularly famous essay called Famine. What was it, like Famine, Wealth, and Morality, or something? It's not quite the right title, but it's close. It's like Famine, Rich People, and Morality, basically. And the argument he makes basically is that everyone is bad because unless we all fundamentally change our lives, because there is no difference between helping your family, helping an individual that you see who is in trouble, and helping someone on the other side of the world. There is unnecessary suffering somewhere. We have the power to do something about that, but we are choosing to buy luxuries instead. Because we have the power to do something about this undue suffering, it is morally obligatory for us to forego morally unnecessary things like our Starbucks coffees, our new clothes and stuff, and to give all this to the poor, the hungry, the starving, the sick. In Bangladesh was the example that he opened with. Africa, Southeast Asia, Latin America, wherever the poor are around the world, wherever the suffering and the dying are.
Live
And this
simply
became
so that others may simply live.
exactly.
Yeah.
And this very amusingly uh, grew into this movement that just boomed in Silicon Valley called effective altruism. And basically, everybody who was not just a California spiritualist, but also kind of tied into the tech world, uh,
Right.
was hugely into this. Was a very they're big supporters of this effective altruism program, which is all about quantitatively calculating what's the most efficient way to help the most people in this utilitarian framework, which follows from the unification of all consciousness. Sam Harris gets called the Malibu meditator by God Sad. I enjoy the label. He is sort of in this crowd as well, I believe. And it was amusing because the whole thing kind of collapsed at the end of 2022 because one of the founders of this movement realized, hey, if we're breaking down the barriers geographically between who we should care about, it makes philosophical sense that we should also break down those barriers in time. There's no reason we should prefer the generations today to generations of the future. We should become long-termists. We should think about the well-being of the future as well as the current. Well, that creates a few problems. First of all, the future is not predictable. We could all be wiped out by an asteroid in 3 weeks. That wouldn't actually change the utilitarian principle, but it would change it if you were a long-termist. But it also resulted in projects that made utilitarians and these California spiritualists feel very uncomfortable. Suddenly, money that had been going to feed starving people in Africa was now funding conferences where tech nerds basically all got together to worry about AI and to just tell each other how dangerous AI is. And they're like, this does not seem like effective altruism. And they started pulling back their money. And Sam Bankman-Fried was a big part of the effective altruism movement, so that brought it down a few levels as well. But what struck me was that this suffering was a kind of information, and the attempt to suppress suffering was in fact a suppression of information as well. And I think there is a tie-in to this California spirituality, the obsession with novelty, with the feelings of thing, is a kind of flight from not so much suffering, I guess, as much as the boredom and the tedium and the feeling of ordinariness that comes from just regular work and regular life. They want to be special. They want to be something else. They want to be spiritual but not religious like all those other people.
Right.
All those other people are religious, and that's boring. There's a kind of classist tone to the desire to set oneself above the religion of the dirty masses.
For sure, for sure. And I mean, on some level, I feel attacked by that, but
But I mean, it's overcome if you actually commit to something.
right, right, right. I mean, that's the idea is the kind of a la carte mentality that goes with this. Like, oh, I'm doing you know, one thing this week, and another thing this week, and they're all from different parts of the world and whatever. And the addiction to initiation is another thing that's really big in these circles. And that's something that I've always criticized because they're like, oh, I got initiated. What do you get initiated into? Are you in a tribe now? Are you like, oh, what are your responsibilities? Like what's changed about your life? Oh, no, I still do the same shit. I'm initiated now. Okay, so nothing happened. Like basically, like you went and had an experience and banged on drums and maybe got naked and probably got like Anyway, you had an experience, and it was transformative in some way that didn't change the way that you live very much. Aside from that, you talk about how you had this experience and your behavior, your sense of responsibility to other people. Or maybe it did. I mean, some of these groups, I mean, they create big groups that becomes somebody's whole identity. And I guess that's cool. But like I said, so many of them are, I think, taking the frame of women, these men's group who do it, take the frame of women because it's safe. Although, you're never really safe because, like you can be a woman's ally, a feminist ally for as long as you want to, you're still eventually going to get accused of sexual misconduct. That's just kind of how that works.
They came for Neil Gaiman last week.
As far as I can tell. I mean, they come for everybody. They come for the biggest feminists. It's an iron law is that the more you help feminists, the more likely are you to be accused of sexual misconduct eventually. So it's a never-ending thing. But these guys, they sell them the thing that their girlfriends or whatever can support. Like, oh, we're going to these men's conferences and we're going to cry and we're going to feel about stuff and it's non-threatening and we worship the Mother Earth and we just we want to learn how to heal and be better partners for you and co-parent with you and co-habitate and co-everything because we want to be equal in every way. They just take women's scripts and then kind of read them back to them, as what they think they want, and that's their spirituality. Whereas, we have to be men is this very contained piece of it, but it's contained and controlled. It's like controlled opposition, basically. We have to be men, but only in a frame that says that we're harmless and we're just strong and stuff. It's just this very emasculated eunuch version of manhood that is acceptable to the most far left women.
Any language that seems to be primarily emotive rather than primarily descriptive in a clarifying way about the physical world, it seems to be a sign, an indicator of this tendency. And, now I'm coming to question, is there really a difference between California spirituality and moralistic therapeutic deism? I guess California is geographically specific, and it seems to be an exporter of particular trends, particular fads that come and go in the MTD frame. But they seem like cousin religions, like Protestantism and Catholicism in some way.
Well, in some sense, I mean, California, because of the Hollywood industry and all that, it had to jive with Middle America. So it has to meet up with Middle America somewhere. Now that's because they can't overcome wokeness, and wokeness is people yelling at you because you're evil. Because they can't overcome that because we're non-judgmental. You're judgmental, and that's what makes you evil. There's no way out of that. They're fucked in there. But really, I think that the root of California spiritualism, which worked for a long time, was that the whole idea, in the way that in the way that Vivek and Donald Trump can use the word God
Yeah.
and mean totally different things, and definitely totally different things, both of them, from like what, like, say, extremely religious people in the South believe is God. uh, like they're talking about very different things. I mean, I
Yeah.
think Donald Trump, obviously, I think if he believes in God, I think it's the God of, it's a deist, God, like it's a providence. But Providence kept that bullet out of his ear. I mean, out of his head. But
Not out of his
and
ear.
then yeah, and the Vivek thing, like, I mean, obviously he's talking about his Brahmanism or whatever. That's a whole different thing. And but as long as you say the word God, it's comforting, which is kind of goes back to that religion thing. And that's what California people have been very good at doing, like God. And then it's the Joseph Campbell overlay of that is that God is everywhere, the same stories over and over, which I jive with a lot of. But there's, like I said, there's that message of the dragon in there somewhere too. And what we've talked about is obviously subjectivism. To a certain extent, you have to
Yeah.
decide what your perspective actually is.
Well, and someone asked me a really good question the other day. Says, isn't subjectivism a dangerous sort of springboard into relativism of the kind that we're seeing in this California spirituality of this moralistic therapeutic deism? I'm okay, you're okay. This is my perspective. This is your perspective. We are all perspectivists. Isn't subjectivism just a hop, skip, and a jump from relativism? And what I realized in thinking about it after talking with Christians for the better part of a decade, more combatively sometimes than others, is that subjectivism is actually more at odds with relativism than objectivism. Objectivism is a like one realization away from relativism, because relativism and objectivism hold the same essential premises, which is that a position is not valid unless it can be objectively justified. The objectivist just thinks that they can do that, whereas the relativist thinks, no, you actually can't. Whereas the subjectivist, the person who says, no, this is my position and I think it's good and I think that position is bad, and I don't need to ground it in some kind of impossible objective epistemic framework in order to justify having an opinion that says, no, I think doing this with kids is bad. I don't need to find some law of the universe to justify that, because you're actually going to have a hard time doing that. But we don't need that. No. So subjectivism actually has a different axiom as far as what is a justified opinion. And relativists and objectivists are the ones that actually share an axiom. Relativism is just the dark mirror reflection of the objectivist with the dragon's truth behind it.
Well, and think about, imagine if there were ancient Rome, right? We can acknowledge that all of these other people exist in the world with their different ideas, and they believe in different gods, and they have different things, and they exist in a different reality, really, that they accept all these gods. And you can acknowledge that as being true, which we do. Yeah, you can acknowledge that all these people have all these different gods, all these different belief systems, and none of them are necessarily more right than any other. Like you can
objectively. What standard would you use? How would you find an objective standard to determine who is objectively best?
Right, and that's acknowledging that there's a reality out there. There are people that believe other things, and you're never going to change them to your way, whatever. Mm-hmm. But then you'd be like, well, okay, what do I believe? And then that's where you get the subjectivism. Like, what do I believe? What's my identity? Those people are always going to have their identity, and they are going to exist in the world. I don't have to pretend that they can't exist in the world and whatever, but I have to have my own subjective reality, and that is, what my actual beliefs are. And that's yeah, I mean, you can't square that with everyone in the universe. Would be the objective things like, oh, you have to square that with everybody, or the relativism, like it's all the same. Well, it's not the same to me. Like if they kill me, that's not the same to me.
No.
Like
Well, that's just
that's the
like your
difference,
opinion, man.
right? And you know what? It is. Like,
Just take the word "just" out. Just take the word "just" out.
That is your opinion, man. Like, I mean, what else do we have, right?
Yeah.
As they say, opinions are like assholes, and everybody has one. But like,
I have objective truth on my side.
Yeah.
I actually speak for God, unlike those other people who only have opinion.
Well, everybody wants to speak for God and be on the right side, and that's like the, yeah. And it, like I said, you can get relativistic with it, but at the same time, like, if you have nothing that's specifically important to you, that you want to protect, that you would care about, whatever, then everything is the same. And once you make the decision that something's good and that's something that you want to protect, then those other things are external forces.
Yeah. I wrote a blog post. I won't read any of it. I just wanted to share the title. This was from December of 2022. The title was "Every Religion is the One True Religion and Not an Ideology." And I feel like that summarizes it. Like it's they define like our thing is truth and other people's things are opinions. Our thing is religion, or as the case today, not religion, it's a relationship. There's been this really silly Christian movement to try to say it's not a religion, it's a relationship, because religion became a bad word.
Jesus.
But it's just linguistic special pleading in every case. And that's what you run into when you are trying to claim objective truth for yourself and take an objectivist framework. And I think it's just more honest to say to stay subjective and to say, this is how it appears to me. This is what I think. And it's valid because I think it. I disagree with other people.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what's actually happening. It's just like people they want to claim this higher authority that makes that's what I say. Like, do you have a hamster in your pocket? Like who's with you that's validating your opinion? People always want some external validation, and it's a little bit of cowardice as well. When you talk to, whether it's religious people, whether it's people who think that they're working for their ancient ancestors who they've cherry picked or whatever, the idea that like my ancestors wouldn't tolerate that. No, what you're saying is you don't like that, but you're being a pussy, and you won't say that you don't like it. So you want the people behind you to say it for you.
Yeah.
And so that's the and then it makes it okay that you said it, and you're not just a hateful prick. But like that's, and you see that so often. People do it all across the board in so many different things. Yeah. And they just want to be like, well, because God, or my ancestors, or like this is the ancient.
They want the power to browbeat and to impose their idea upon other people with law. And that's what these constructions of objective epistemology do. There's an excellent book that people should read. It's the best book in defense of liberalism I've ever read. Still wrong, but very good book, called Kindly Inquisitors by Jonathan Rauch. And he basically tries to say that the free market, science, and liberal democracy are doing the same thing. And what they are doing is establishing legitimacy. Who gets to decide and who gets to impose upon other people. And he bites the bullet with all of the honesty that you should expect of a serious philosopher. He says, yes, in medical science, we really do impose certain views of health upon other views of health. But what makes it okay in a liberal society where we value freedom is that you have a right to investigate these things on your own, to bring up second opinions. And his two rules are, there's no special pleading and there's no final say. It hasn't really worked out that way, of course, in our society. We very much have special pleading. But at least in principle, there's no final say, which is something. But it is about imposing one view upon others. And that's what the call for objectivity does, unless it's used to point out that other people don't have an objective justification, in which case I'm okay, you're okay, we're all the same man.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Another feature really of this California spirituality is the we could call it mid spirituality, because there's a lot of word salad that is generally involved in it. Like, I used holding space. What the fuck does that mean? Like holding space. Like, there's all kinds of word salad that goes with it. This long string. I've read posts by people that are just like an ad lib of like spiritual word salad of things that don't actually mean anything, or they mean something to someone, but like they're just, this is what spiritual, in the way that people, like mid people, as they say on X or whatever, mid people say things that other people, that dumb people think intelligent people say. Like,
yeah, it's just using language that invokes a particular association, and
without
using the language.
Yeah.
Right. It's purely evocative. It's not descriptive of anything.
Right. It sounds spiritual. It's spiritual language. Therefore, it's supposed to give you the feeling of being profound in the way that people think if you speak a certain way. The perfect example, I think, of this, and it comes straight out of California, straight out of Cali, is obviouslike Kamala, the unburdened by what has been. like it's like you that could be right in one of these like contexts. Like, what you have to do is hold space so that together we can be unburdened by what has been.
Yeah,
and it sounds
move forward
because it sounds because it sounds Yoda-esque. It's like, and it's weird, and that's where I think they've taken a lot of this languages from, like Zen koans and things like that, things that are like purposefully sound off and contradictory, but then if something sounds contradictory, it must be deep, man. Whereas sometimes it's just bullshit, like if something sounds contradictory, and then we've said this about, I think, Christians and stuff.
And if you push me too hard on the ambiguity, if you can't accept the mystery, if you can't accept the paradox, you're overthinking it.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Our God is a God of logic and of unlogic at the same time. That's how logic works.
Reason and unreason. Yes. Yeah. Do we have any comments?
Yes, we have a lot of comments. Mike Ronan says, I feel more spiritual already because necklaces.
Thank you. Thank you. Necklaces make men spiritual. As I said in my Instagram ad for this, if you want to become more spiritual, you got to get more necklaces.
And do you know why that is? Necklaces make men more spiritual because it makes them more vulnerable. It's easier to get choked out.
That is true. There's probably a case of that. I don't think that they've thought that through, though. It is a weird thing, though. It is with men. It's like everybody's got to wear the beads. Everybody's got to wear the necklaces. It's like, oh, now you know he's got something spiritual going on. And it applies to the cross too. People, it's like, I'm signaling that I'm like spiritual.
Yeah, the keys to spirituality really come down to just vulnerability, empathy, and compassion. That's it, really, and gratitude. And you could probably throw a couple more in there. Just say those enough, and you too.
Okay. I thought you were making a real point. I was like, what's
no.
going on here? I was
sorry,
them, but now like you brought me back.
Vulnerability.
Like, what's happening?
Galactic Spectator says the drip is California lovin'. Good job. Yeah, Tupac knew how to spiritualize.
That's it.
052G. Haha, I love the drip, fellas. Kyle says good vibes from Canadistan.
Nice,
052G says
brother.
I just noticed that, yes, brother. Just say brother a lot. Like
say brother a lot. Everyone's a brother.
Hey, brother. 052G says I just noticed the kombucha. Death Before Disarm FPV says Letterkenny got Cali right, but have you had the fish tacos in LA? They're so much better in LA. That is a reference to something I don't know, but it sounds funny.
Yes. Well, that show is funny. So I haven't watched a lot of it, but whenever I have, it's funny.
Okay. 052G says Aubrey Marcux, haha, JK.
Yeah.
Taylor says, I grew up in San Diego. California has the climate and geography to be one of the best places on the planet to live. Unfortunately, the vibes make it insufferable in more ways than one. Yeah, they got to bring that like D sharp down to like a solid C or maybe even a C flat. I don't know.
Yeah, and like I
Wrong,
said, I
wrong
really think
vibe.
that happened with woke. I mean, because I think the vibes were right for a long time. I liked the vibes. Yeah, I liked California vibes. I'm a West Coast guy at this
Yeah,
point, but like
business
yeah.
surfer bro, beach bodybuilding and like that seemed kind of ideal in many
Yeah,
ways.
I mean, keep in mind, like the thing about California was we're talking about a state that elected Arnold Schwarzenegger as governor not very long ago.
Yeah,
So in my lifetime that happened. So it's taken a turn recently, like in the past like couple decades. Because before that,
yeah.
I mean, like there was a mix because it was commerce driven. It's one of the biggest economies in the world, and so
I've
that had to make sense.
I feel like I saw a chart somewhere that LA alone had a population greater than probably 2/3 of the rest of the states in the union,
Maybe,
something like that.
maybe, yeah.
It's
I
huge.
don't, yeah, it is huge. I don't know if that big, but it has a lot of people, and
Yeah.
it's a powerful economic force in the world, and just generally California. I think they say it's one of the it's in the top 10 of economies in the world by
Yeah.
itself. You know.
052G says, bros calling me out with the feeling to learn bit. Well, apologies about that. If it makes you feel any better, I listen to a lot of things too. We all do
Yeah.
it.
Well.
It's just good to apply it. It's good to like take what you heard, Andrew Huberman say, or Brett Weinstein say, or we said, and like follow up. So I'm going to read that thing that they mentioned about, and then you go find like the audiobook or the physical book and read it, have some conversations with some friends, like interact with the material you're taking in, and you can turn just that feeling into actual learning very easily.
Yeah, like we said, that's like kind of like the master's level version of it. Is basically okay, where you're interacting with material, and then you go do your own research and make your own analysis.
Yeah. Coach Josh says, just here to take fashion notes. Here for you.
That's it. That's it. You can dress like us. It's cool. It's cool. Even in Tasmania. I mean, maybe you'll have Tasmanian style, but that's okay too, man.
He's actually got a pretty incredible style, especially when it comes to archery.
Oh,
We'll
for
have to
sure.
drag him on for that at some point. Speaking of dragons, the Dragonist says mosh pits are also a good example of this. And of this, I assume he means that oceanic feeling
Yes.
of losing
100%.
oneself in the wave.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Elvis Presley says, Coach Josh Wood, I agree. The fashion is pretty sick. Cargo NYC says, thanks for making the space for this. Namaste.
No problem, brother. Yeah.
Yeah. The yoga is also a big part of that. And I think whenever I thought of, I didn't call it California spirituality, but there was definitely a hipster spiritualist that you would see in Seattle and Portland. And I always associate it with like a tall, skinny dude with a man bun and maybe less than ideal hygiene. Sometimes it was okay. Who is always lurking in the yoga studios full of women. And it always struck me as a cynical pretense for less spiritual purposes.
I can't imagine that he would have such he's just trying to like align his chakras.
Align his chakras with your chakras.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I mean, yeah, I mean, yoga's part of it. We don't want to hate on yoga too much because yoga by itself, there's a lot of good value in it. It just happens to be associated with it's the white girl yoga really that is the what we would make fun of. which is most of it really in the country. But I went and did hot yoga, which I actually really enjoy. Probably should do it more, but who has the time for all that shit?
Yeah.
But hot yoga itself is a really maybe feel really good. But I had to listen to like, and now we're gonna open our hearts and da 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 and all that shit, and I'm just like, shut the fuck up. Like I want to do this to like dark ambient or something, and not hear your voice.
Yeah.
Just to call the fucking
Put
tell
on
me
some
what
like
to do.
Tool.
Yeah. Like I think this is one of those real things where I'd prefer to have the AI voice like come over it and just tell me like, okay, now you want to outstretch this and go that way and whatever.
And I'm not. I don't think either of us is trying to make fun of things purely because they're popular. That's something I think comedians do a little bit
that would
too
make us hipsters
quickly. Yeah, it's annoying because some things that are popular are actually cool, really cool. I was never into CrossFit. The CrossFit cult is a pretty cool cult as far as cults go.
As cults go, it's not. I mean, it's gay now that it's all women, but I mean, generally speaking. I've taught CrossFit. I mean, like early in the age. I mean, I was never certified in it, but like I was at the point where I was helping this guy start a gym and leading classes.
Well,
I like it.
The new cult you're in is also pretty cool. The jujitsu cult.
Jiu-jitsu cult. Oh, yeah, that is for sure 100% a cult.
Yeah.
And it's pop. It's not good because it's popular. It's popular because it's good. But there are also culty aspects of it and different things.
Yoga can be like that too. It's not bad because it's popular. It's like certain people who do it are annoying because of this pretentious. Well, first of all, there's the pretense of interest for less spiritual purposes, but there's also the pretentiousness of the spirituality behind this physical exercise.
Right.
That's like the annoying thing. And there is a tragedy here where it seems that anything that gets too large, whether it's CrossFit or LA, anything that gets too large seems to attract the worst kinds of leaders and the worst kinds of people. And while I enjoy philosophy, I know this began as kind of a joke here, like, oh, keep philosophy boring. But really, if it were to get too interesting and too popular with a broader audience, you would end up with more Ryan Holidays and less Dan Dennett's.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the way because there's the guy who's really good at a thing, and then there's the guy who's good at marketing it. And those are not necessarily the same guy.
Right.
Like the guys who are great marketers and great, and many times those are the guys whose names we remember because they're the names who popularized the thing. There's some nerdy genius who probably was, I didn't want to call myself a genius, but like I'm like some dude who barely understands money and in marketing, but like has a cool idea, and then somebody who has the money to make it work, or the know-how or the business mind to make it work. And a lot of times is the guy that we remember, or the person like me finds manager. One of the two.
The classic Reddit example is Edison and Tesla.
Yeah. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, exactly. Those kind of things. That's not that unusual in society. Getting back to, just because I think it's a good point that you made, is not making fun of things just because they're popular, because that's its own kind of bullshitty, doomer kind of juvenile mentality. Oh, that's everywhere now. Like to complain about, like, even, I mean, it would happen with like, for instance, when I was doing Germanic paganism, obviously the show Vikings came out, I think maybe a little after I started it, but like pretty close into it. I didn't start it because of that, but I very different reasons. But then it blew up, and everybody wanted to do Viking things, get Viking tattoos, and all this stuff, and it went everywhere. And there were a lot of people in that contingent. It's like, because it's a stupid show, nobody's doing my thing, and I'm like, well, if you really like the thing, then you want more people to do it. Like there's only so much. Yeah, I mean, I guess
Yeah.
if you have superior knowledge and you're better at it, then you should be,
But
you should be glad, and you're
but it
just
is
ahead of
one
the
of
game.
those. It is one of those cases where it's like, but if you get a lot of people brought into it for the wrong reason or in a shallow way, it makes your thing appear and feel hollow and shallow.
Yes.
So I get that. There are ways that things can explode in ways that doesn't happen. And I can't
pretend I understand all of that, but I know that during COVID, everyone was locked inside, and at the same time, a certain TV show came on the air, and that was I think this was during COVID, and that was The Queen's Gambit, this show about this female chess player, and because of those two things in combination, and a couple Twitch streamers who became really popular streaming chess just blew up.
Oh, really? Okay.
And I used to be a pretty decent player. Like I'm no master. I'm not even really mediocre. I'm just a really, really long-term amateur. But I used to do okay. I used to be middle of the road. Now when I play online, I have gotten worse. Not because my skill has gone down, but because so many people have come in and have actually learned a lot. There are a lot of very good chess players out there now, which is like, well, I'm getting blown out of the water, but like there's something kind of cool about that. Like, sweet. I guess I gotta dig down and learn some things now.
Yeah, or you just don't want to do it anymore. But like it's no, and I feel that way a little bit with like the men's space. Like I had to recalibrate a lot, and it's like because no one wanted to talk about it. I'm like, I'm the expert of all these things. I did all the research. I was whatever, and then then you have all these guys who now there's because it's an industry. Now spend hours and hours and hours coaching men, and they talk to men all the time. And they have all this kind of clinical knowledge of this kind of stuff, where I was dealing all in theory. And then you have other people like the fact that I totally didn't even know that we went to talk about gender, that like the whole history of the word gender has been like blown up by like 10 different people. Like at the point where it was almost common knowledge. And I was like, wait, I'm the only one who knows about these weird ass things. And so now it's just like, well, okay, well that's happening and I can't really be mad about it because that's good. That's good. But then at the same time, it's like, well, it's time for me to move on. We
are in, was it Alice in Wonderland or Through the Looking Glass, where you have to keep running faster and faster in order to stay in the same place. You can't just offer one thing. It's what have you done for me lately?
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Joram Arentved says, if anybody claims that he can't let to trust why the Buddhism is good enough, it's just hymns, his own sake case, thanks of his good receptance statue, take on why he lets to simb is being too.
That got run through Google Translate.
Namaste.
I think.
Orville 999 says, imagine arguing all day with people about what Nietzsche actually meant. That's my big fear about philosophy getting popular. I mean, I like talking about Nietzsche, but I know what you mean. I know like that this like anything can become an argument about how many angels are dancing on the head of a pin.
Right.
Like, and you like the kind of most head in the sky discussions of esoteric details with no connection to our physical experience of the world that people complained about with Christian theology, can happen with anything. But I will say, the depth, the highest levels of any field are going to look that way to everybody on the outside. Because these like super fine detail discussions about what Nietzsche actually meant by the Superman, for example, which is a subject we've discussed, sure. And it actually changed my mind on that. Like that's not going to be interesting to 99% of the public. but it doesn't need to be interesting to 99% of the public in order to be a good conversation worth having. We don't need to justify what is interesting to us to some kind of broad consensus. And indeed, that kind of justification according to consensus is what leads to this vague language and this vapid, empty, platitudinous talk that you see with both politicians and their spiritual mirrors, the California spiritualists.
Right.
It's the same vapid platitudes, the evocative language that speaks to a broad audience. And this is the point, I think we've brought it up before, that David Foster Wallace makes in E Unibus Plurum, where he says that television is the lowest form of art, not because there's something inherent to television, but because the size of the audience is such that any sufficiently high elevated point will be lost on the majority of the audience, because people are wildly divergent on the things that they are deep and intelligent and well educated about, whereas they are very common in what they are vulgar and lowbrow and prurient about. And so to appeal to a broad audience, to appeal to the majority, to the consensus, you have to omit finer details, not just in conversations about Nietzsche, but about art, about science. Science has to get dumbed down. How do you think that's going to go? Law gets dumbed down. Yeah. Right. We all got an education of how that goes. So while I understand the concern, I guess he was talking about that. Actually, I'm getting lost in the details myself. He was saying if philosophy got too broad and too big, then you'd have a bunch of people arguing about what Nietzsche really meant, when what he meant was actually, on those details, was perhaps very obvious to people who actually read Nietzsche. But
yeah, well, and the other thing, the danger there is that, especially with philosophy, is that so much of what we see now is quotes. And Nietzsche people share quotes, and then they want you to talk about the quote, and the quote has a context, and you can pull like all kinds of lightning out of Nietzsche, but like it won't necessarily show you what he meant. It's just a quote that sounds cool, and that's really how most people like. That's the junior high school, college level of liking Nietzsche, is that you liked something that sounded badass that came out of it. That's what a lot of people like about Nietzsche. But then if you really dig into what he's talking about truth and ideas and all this thing, and it's way more complicated. And like today, actually, one of the questions that I got in my Instagram AMA was, Nietzsche said that the true religion of man is Islam. What are your thoughts on that? And I literally was like, quote in context, or it didn't happen. So I'm like, I've never heard anything like that in my entire life. And maybe he made a comment about Islam at one point in his writing somewhere that sounded remotely positive. Or even when you're talking about man and Nietzsche, he could have meant something very bad.
Yeah,
because man,
especially in the context of the last man, the Superman.
Yes. So I was like, I have no idea what that is. I mean, you'd have to give me some context to where you find. I need context. I need a book. I need whatever, because that I can't comment on something that sounds that vague when it comes to Nietzsche.
Quote posting is like the antithesis of philosophy and philosophical thinking. I saw someone do a video last week that was a philosopher tier list, and I'm like, okay, I'll enjoy this video as much as the next guy, but creating tier lists is the opposite of philosophy, And as far as this quote thing goes, I want to share one that I discovered last week in digging through Heidegger. At one point in Being in Time, Heidegger says, appearing is a not showing itself all hyphenated. So not hyphen showing hyphen itself. Now, if you take that quote by itself out of context, it is just a contradiction. It is actually like it is like saying green is not a color. Appearing is a not showing itself. Now, within the context of Heidegger's project and his precise meanings of these terms, that sentence actually does make sense. It has a real meaning that is not crazy. But if you just take the quote out by itself, it is crazy. It makes no sense. And most philosophical quotes are kind of like that. Now, Nietzsche is like kind of a weird exception because sometimes, because not all of his writing is aphoristic, but he did write aphorisms that these things were kind of meant to be taken on their own. But he said they are also meant to be digested slowly and chewed on for, a while. Not
and
just
probably in the context of his other work, like that's because he can't.
right.
Yeah, I mean, totally out of context. Like, what is, like, man is something that must be overcome. What are you talking about? Like that. There's no, like that. Okay, what are you even saying? You have to understand what he means by all that to even like really get a real picture of what that sentence is about.
Yeah.
But, that is interesting. I almost feel like I should quote post you on the Order of Fire's Instagram page tomorrow. I should quote post you as saying quote posts are the opposite of philosophy, because that's actually kind of an awesome quote. and
It'd be cheeky and funny.
It'd be fun. I think we might have to do it. Like, I think that's the way to go.
Me in this pose, doing Bhagwan posture.
Yes.
Yeah. You can philosophize in quotes, but most philosophy is not done that way. And the good quotes are the product of, intense thinking that was not just quote thinking. And this is the problem, because if philosophy is about actually thinking through things, you have this Orwellian danger of prefabricated sentences filling in the blanks and thinking for you. This is why it's easy for a postmodernism generator to just generate an essay, or for us to just ad lib. You're, I think, a little bit better at it than me, but I think with some practice I could do it too. Just to sort of ad lib spiritualist language. At one point I could do it with Christianese quite well, but the Christians were so, fish swimming in water in that language that they couldn't really get away with doing that with each other.
Right.
They would just translate regular sentences into Christianese, and they were still conveying meaningful things just in their own idiomatic lexicon. But with the spiritualist language, it's a lot more like politicians speak. It's a lot more just, I'm speaking in vague generalities that seem profound because they're vague and therefore maybe mysterious. Maybe it's a paradox. Ooh.
Well, and that's one of the points I forgot that I wanted to make, was that it's a strategy of conflict avoidance.
That's our fourth character trait. Yes.
Yeah.
Unification, oneness, and conflict aversion are kind of similar, maybe the same. I don't know. Yeah. But that conflict aversion is the behavioral side, whereas the oneness is sort of the belief side. It's the conflict aversion is the behavioral manifestation of this belief. Yeah.
Well, I mean, saying like, hey man, that's your trip and that's cool. Like, you can have your own, we're all one. And that's de-escalation.
We aspire to be the dude from The Big Lebowski.
Yeah, it's de-escalation. And that way we can, in the raw things of how things really work, I mean, because these people are shrewd at some level beneath this. I mean, you don't become a spiritual level of like thousands of people without like being shrewd.
Yeah.
And so beneath this is like, hey man, let's we can all agree that we're all human, right? And we can, we all have feelings, and we all want to be happy, right? And so let's work on this contract that we were talking about. We can work out the finer details. Is everybody cool? Is it cool now? All right, yeah. There's a way that you can de-escalate that. And the example of it, I always bring up this one boss that I have who just stands out as just a vacuous human being to me, which makes sense because he's the interior designer in Beverly Hills. And I remember one time, this was when I was probably at the end of my angry atheist phase and moving into Satanist, like probably like right about that point is where I was, because I just hated this guy. And I'm just like sitting in his office, like looking up Church of Satan, like on that's phone, I was his office manager. And I was like, fuck this guy. And he was like, had perfectly white teeth. He was like just handsome, like whatever, like interior designer of Beverly Hills, like what you would think it would be. And I remember he said one day, he was saying very California things. He was like, well, like everyone believes in something except Jack. Like it was kind of like except Jack, because I was like this little black cloud over in the corner of his office. But everybody was like everyone believes in something, right? Yeah. Like, that's kind of like the vibe, you know, like, and then that helps you to do business. Like that's one of the points I brought up in the introduction. I think it helps you to do business if you're like, do you believe in God, man? I believe in God. We want good things. We want to be prosperous, right? Everyone wants to be prosperous, and you can just de-escalate a conversation into like negotiation, and make it feel like no one got fucked, everyone's like
Yeah.
everyone came out a winner. You can all be chill afterwards. You know, like it's all conflict avoidance. It's like the exact opposite of like what you imagine like negotiating with Donald Trump would be like. You know, like like art of the deal, like, well, here, you know, like fucking, I'm gonna fuck you before you fuck me. But like in California would do that, but like everyone would be like, chill.
Yeah.
You know,
but
that's
so
how it works.
I don't know what California culture is like, but there's a similarity with Seattle. And Seattle
it's West Coast,
and Seattle is also very conflict avoidant, but the Seattle chill is real. That's the like people will pretend to be your friends but then ice you out. But there's also an intense level of passive aggressiveness that hides behind the overt conflict avoidance.
Right.
And there are a lot of people who are we'll say nice bad people, which the Seattle was like the inverse of the Bostonian like mean good person. There's a guy in Boston, probably several thousand in fact, who will, if you're stuck on the side of the road, he will pull over and he will help you, and he will mock your inability to fix it yourself and berate you for not taking good care of your car as he fixes your car for you, just to help you out. And then he'll get back in his car and tell you to freaking change your freaking oil next time as he takes off after he fixed your car. Mm-hmm. Whereas, you know, in Seattle, you're more likely to like be stuck on the side of the road and someone will drive by. You're like, they'll wave and be like, "Oh, hope everything's okay."
Yeah.
They drive down the road. You know, it's good feelings. We have so much good intentions. We're full of, we're overflowing with good intentions. Just not with you right now. You know, there's something like compensatory about the self presentation, in juxtaposition with the absence of actual assistance or help.
Yeah, and I feel like that's just very West Coast generally. I think, well, and California bled up. I mean, I can't say that what Seattle was like 100 years ago or 75 years ago. But I mean, in the time, I've been to Seattle and obviously lived in Portland for a good long time, and it's the West Coast is pretty much the West Coast. You know, like in terms of that conflict avoidance and let's be chill and whatever. And it's also maybe a little bit, I don't know, Scandinavian, especially once you get into.
Oh, I hope people can hear me. I don't know. Can you hear me? Yeah, you can hear me. Okay. I can't hear you. Oh no, no sound. At least on one side, yeah. But agreed, there's something very Nordic about the freeze out. very German in many ways as well. That I remember some studies, I think, show about preferred levels of personal space, and those Nordic climates were always like, we'll stay further apart, we'll have fewer people over as guests, we prefer to be alone, we prefer to be quiet, and so forth, which is fine. That might have some influence on Seattle culture in particular. We'll see if we can get Jack back. Any more comments here? We've also been going for a little while. We'll see if Jack can get his sound back. I'm going to take these off. They're bothering me. Yeah, I'll have to think a little bit more about whether there actually is any difference between California spirituality, this kind of conflict avoidant oneness, unity, maybe some drugs, and moralistic therapeutic deism. I wish I had the paper in front of me. Let me see if I can pull that up in case anybody is interested. Let me see. Moralistic therapeutic deism is a term that was first introduced in the 2005 book Soul Searching: The Religious and Spiritual Lives of American Teenagers by the sociologist
Check.
Christian Smith. Oh, there he is.
Okay.
Back. I was just going through the anthropology behind moralistic therapeutic deism, which comes from a lot of money out there. Anyways, comes from Christian Smith and Melinda Lundquist Benton. Okay, let me read off the 5 tenets real quick, just because we're bringing it up. The 5 tenets of moralistic therapeutic deism are: 1, a God exists who created and ordered the world and watches over human life on earth. 2, God wants people to be good, nice, and fair to each other, as taught in the Bible and by most other world religions. 3, the central goal of life is to be happy and to feel good about oneself. 4, God does not need to be particularly involved in one's life, except when God is needed to resolve a problem. And 5, good people go to heaven when they die.
That's so on it. I mean, that is really what most people believe, and that's like I said, when you code, when politicians talk about God, it really connects with people on that level more than anything else.
Yeah, it's this vague generic force of good that grants legitimacy to one's moral opinions and values.
Yeah.
It's this vague gesturing to this thing behind what you think is good. I need to take this off. This freaking plastic jacket is way too warm. And drug rug.
Drug rug. I've never heard that before. Oh.
We're shedding our pretenses here.
Yes. I know. It's like I felt like the spell was broken when I got off stage and came back, and I was just like, now I'm just a douchebag. like now I just feel. I felt like I was owing character and everything, and now I'm like now I just feel like a douchebag. What the hell? But do we have any comments floating around?
No more comments. We still got 12 people watching, but that's cool. Cool. Was there anything else? Yeah. I feel like we've outlined this thing and the problems with this thing. Not only is there a kind of ambiguous vapidity to it, but it has no defensive mechanism to the more pernicious stuff, whether that's Marxism or Islam, or something else. There is an insidious form of Christianity too. The Jesuits specifically. Yeah. They're like kind of everything. Like all the Marxists in Latin America that made Latin America both communist and like Catholic at the same time,
Right.
were all Jesuits. And there's always some weird Jesuit involvement in like a lot of these like half Christian hybrid things that seem to spread around.
The Jesuits are behind it.
Yeah.
No.
People who think the Freemasons are behind everything, you're like eye on the wrong ball there.
Yeah.
If you want a real secret society that's like, it's not exactly successfully taking over the world, but it's really trying to. Like the Jesuits are a more interesting group to study than like the Freemasons or the Illuminati.
Interesting. Yeah. The thing is, you talked about the insidious thing, is the threat of like, obviously like the woke and so forth coming in. And I think that's also a commentary on how Hollywood changed, like, and why the content we see now up until a certain point, and I would say, even into the 90s, if not into I would say actually early 2000s, the content you were seeing was still meant to connect with normal people. And that idea of God that comes from your list there, like that's what normal people believe. Like, everybody goes, good people go to heaven, all that, not a deeply Christian God, but this kind of nice God that people believed in, the God of niceness. And that's what Hollywood really, really oriented to. And that could pull all of our heartstrings and like connect with us and make it seem normal. But because, like I said, it had no apparatus to fight this, dialectic, the Marxist woke dialectic thing, that it then, now that's why we only get Marxist propaganda out of Hollywood. And it doesn't connect with people. Like, it really doesn't they're being preached at. It's all didactic, and they're being preached at rather than being entertained and like touched and whatever. That's why most movies, I think, just aren't meant for people who don't want to hear the message.
Yeah, you can actually get even worse than being didactic. You can just get danced at even these days.
Yeah, I mean, it used to. Yeah, I mean, it used to have, breakdancing used to be fun, and now it's just this weird thing. now it's academic.
If someone's yelling at me, at least I can yell back. If someone dances at me, what the hell am I supposed to do with that?
Yeah. I guess that's why dance-offs were a thing. Like, we can solve this problem with dance.
But
because what are you going to do? Are you going to argue with dance? I don't think so.
No, how are you gonna have a dance off with a Down syndrome person, or whatever they're throwing at you these days?
Yeah. Like, checkmate. You're done. Like, your privilege needs to get checked, because Down syndrome dancing is coming at you fast.
Imagine someone brought up Muslims before. Imagine being like a Muslim general and having the children's crusade coming at you. You're just like, the fuck?
Seriously? You're like, what? This is not how it's done.
Just take
that's a mess. Come on. Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's basically the same thing as Down syndrome dance off. But that'll be a great thing. People can pull that out for a quote for me.
Quote block that.
Yeah, for sure. But anyway, I think if we've gotten to the end here, we can start to wrap it up.
Yeah.
But I wanted to say that we didn't run like I said, we raw dogged the opening today because I didn't have a fresh opener that has. I think the Discord that we've been running was not successful. Just because the thing with tech is that, like, you got to go to where the people, with a platform that the people are on. And we tried Discord because other people use Discord. Maybe it'll work for us. It really did not. Like, none of our guys wanted to get on it. And so, like, what you had was we get new guys who are interested in what we're doing on the show, come in and introduce themselves on the Discord. And then, like, they wouldn't comment. Like, they wouldn't say anything and no one else would say anything. And then you get a ghost cricket zone. Which really wasn't what it was supposed to be, and so most of our guys well, I mean, the whole Order of Fire and the First Men, which I'm going to start recruiting for pretty hard right now because we have some events coming up. I'd like to see some more people there. We already have a lot of guys who are coming out, but we could be big time, really cool, lots of stuff going on. And I just think we've matured as an organization. I think we're ready to like grow.
Yeah.
But
the Telegram is freaking insane. I can't even keep up with it anymore. Even the firearms chat is like a challenge to stay up to date there.
yeah,
Cool.
I mean, and that's what we have. Like the actual Order of Fire and the Order of Fire and the First Men is basically all on Telegram. And so we have a bunch of folders and we have all these conversations. Like you said, the firearms forum is so off the hook that you're having problems keeping up with it. We have a Father Hood one on there that is really busy. The Warhammer one was going really strong, and I think it'll probably pick up again now that they have a big release coming out. We're going to do a Warhammer 40K podcast here in, I think, the 5th. We're going to have another guest on who knows more about it than we do. I don't know anything. Chris knows a little bit, but some of these guys have been doing it for years. Yeah, some of these guys are like deep.
Dark Eldar, Chaos,
Yeah.
Legion, but my knowledge was more on the strategy side. Different guys get into different things. Like I was definitely on the military strategy. I would be the guy that brings like the like half unpainted army because I'm only interested in like the tactics and stuff. And other guys would get like super deep in the lore, and the lore is really like the cool stuff to talk about. Although like the combination of the art, the lore, and the strategy gaming part sort of combined to make something that's a greater than the sum of its parts, which is kind of what makes it so cool. But I don't know as much about the lore as some of these guys.
Some of our guys are like 20 books in or something like that. So they know all the things. They can speak basically a language that has nothing to do with, but they say it's very solar, and so we wanted to bring it in and talk about that. So we're going to be doing that. But what I was saying basically is that our whole organization is function on a daily basis. We have a mighty network, but we function on a daily basis on Telegram. We talk all the time there. That's where all the fun stuff, and it has circle videos where I can reply to stuff, and all of us can reply like with our faces and actually talk when we want to, or just talk out, type blocks of text. And it's just a really, it operates in the way that people communicate now. And you can do that with Discord, but none of our guys were really wanted to do that because they already know how to use Telegram. Why do they want to do this? So we thought maybe it would make more sense to change the Greater Mandala and make that a Telegram group, and then put all the same guys into that and transfer them over. And then like if they can ask us questions, I can jump in with a circle video and explain something a lot easier. And some of the other guys from guys from the First Men will also have access to the group, so they can jump in and respond to something too. Because we really want to make an area where you guys can have a little bit more access to us, and the rest of the guys in the group, and get more out of it, and it just make it easier for us to have that interaction rather than jumping over to a different platform, which is kind of a pain in the ass. Because I'm on Telegram like all damn day with these guys, like sometimes way more than I should be. But some of these guys are basically my friends, so like that's who I talk to all day. And they have a lot of guys who have relationships in the group, back and forth, helping each other with different things. So it's a cool thing. So we're basically going to move over to Telegram. We'll put the Greater Mandala there. If you're in the Greater Mandala, keep your eye out. I'll put some instructions of how to do that once I figure it out and we get it all set up. But that's the idea. So I wanted to let everybody know that that's happening, and hopefully that way you guys can interact a little bit better with us, a little bit easier. And, I'm sure it'll have its own pitfalls and whatever, which we'll find. But that's the direction that we're going to go with that, since I was never a big fan of Discord anyway, but we'll try it. And so we'll go into the next thing. But anyway, that's about all I got. You got anything else, Chris?
Nope.
Nope. All right, guys. Thank you for watching, and peace out.